We're counting down the 7 most disturbing sleepwalking deaths ever recorded, cases where the human brain turned an ordinary night into a fatal nightmare. From high-rise tumbles and deadly midnight drives to chilling moments where loved ones became unwitting witnesses, each entry reveals how parasomnia can transform familiar settings into scenes of tragedy without an ounce of conscious awareness. Which case ranks as the most disturbing of all? Let's begin with number 7. Tobias Chen, a 31-year-old software engineer in Portland, had lived with sleepwalking since childhood. His parents once installed special locks at home, and college roommates remembered finding him in the hallway, confused but unreachable. In March 2018, Tobias's sleep disorder took a deadly turn. That night, his last phone message went out at 11:23 p.m. Routine, nothing unusual. Hours later, at 2:18 a.m., building security logs recorded him moving through the apartment in his pajamas. 3 minutes after, a sensor registered the living room window opening on the 6th floor. Tobias's condition was diagnosed as REM sleep behavior disorder, a rare form of parasomnia where the brain's normal paralysis during dreaming fails. Instead of lying still, the sleeper acts out vivid dreams. Investigators later learned he had described feeling trapped in a fire in his dreams. Forensic analysis confirmed he climbed out the window, unaware of the drop below. The courtyard was quiet until 6:47 a.m. when a neighbor discovered his body. The autopsy listed catastrophic cranial trauma and multiple fractures with no signs of defensive injury. Toxicology showed no drugs or alcohol. The apartment window had been closed earlier that night. Tobias's family pressed for answers, and within months, the building installed window restrictors. City officials soon required them in all high-rise rentals. Tobias never knew he was in danger. His case became a warning that even familiar spaces can turn lethal when the sleeping brain loses control. Rachel Morrison was 23 years old when she began taking Ambien for insomnia. She had no history of sleepwalking, but in the weeks before her death, friends received late-night texts about strange dreams and waking up confused. On a humid night in July 2019, Rachel messaged her roommate at 1:52 a.m., "Taking meds? See you at brunch." Less than an hour later, security footage from her Austin apartment captured her stepping outside in pajamas, face blank, car keys in hand. At 2:47 a.m., telematics from her sedan recorded the engine starting and entering the highway. For 14 miles, Rachel drove at highway speeds, averaging 63 miles per hour without swerving or slowing. Dashcam video from a nearby truck revealed her hands steady on the wheel, eyes open but unfocused. There was no reaction to headlights, honking, or the concrete barrier that finally stopped her. The crash occurred at 2:51 a.m. Police found her still in her seatbelt, car keys in the ignition, pajamas untouched by blood. There were no skid marks, no attempt to brake. Toxicology confirmed Ambien at therapeutic levels. The autopsy listed severe cranial trauma, with death occurring instantly. Internal company emails later revealed the manufacturer had been aware of complex sleep behaviors for years. After Rachel's family filed suit, the FDA issued its strongest warning yet. Ambien and similar drugs can trigger fatal actions while users remain completely unconscious. For millions who rely on sleep aids, the Morrison case became a chilling reminder. Sometimes, the brain's betrayal is set in motion by a single pill. Kenneth Watts was a high school teacher in Minneapolis, a father of 3, and a man whose sleep disorder had quietly shaped his family's routines for years. His wife kept a journal, noting nights when she found him cooking at odd hours or wandering the hallway, unreachable and unresponsive. The previous winter, she had started locking the doors after he nearly stepped outside barefoot in the snow. On a November night in 2017, those precautions failed. At 10:57 p.m., Kenneth said goodnight in the family group chat. The house was quiet until 3:12 a.m. when the back door alarm was disarmed. Its chime, loud enough to wake a light sleeper, but not his wife that night. The temperature outside had dropped to minus 12 degrees Fahrenheit. Kenneth, in pajamas and socks, left the house and began walking through the neighborhood. His condition combined sleep terrors and confusional arousal, a state where the body moves, but the mind cannot process reality or danger. He wandered half a mile, following a path of footprints later traced by investigators. There was no attempt to return home, no sign of struggle or awareness of the cold. A snowplow driver spotted the trail in the park at 3:33 a.m., but by sunrise, Kenneth's body was found in the same spot, lifeless. The autopsy recorded severe hypothermia. Once his core temperature dropped below 82 degrees, his heart could no longer maintain a normal rhythm, and cardiac arrest followed. There were no drugs or alcohol in his system. The door alarm logs and footprints confirmed he had left during a deep sleep episode. After his death, neighbors began installing door alarms and attending sleep disorder awareness meetings. Kenneth's wife produced an educational video urging families to take even the smallest warning signs seriously. For those living with parasomnia, the greatest danger sometimes waits just beyond the threshold of home. Jessica Harmon was 19 years old, a college freshman in Boulder, Colorado, and a dedicated swimmer with no history of sleep disorders. In the weeks before her death in February 2020, her diary described mounting stress from exams and team tryouts. Roommate messages mentioned odd nighttime habits, Jessica opening the window, standing by the sill, then returning to bed without a word. Nothing in her medical records suggested any risk. On the night of February 5th, Jessica and her roommate both turned in early. Around 1:15 a.m., the roommate stirred at the sound of movement but thought nothing of it. At 2:03 a.m., a student across the courtyard glanced up and saw Jessica, barefoot and in pajamas, stepping onto the narrow ledge outside her third-story window. Phone video later showed her standing perfectly still, eyes open but unfocused, arms at her sides. There was no sign of panic or hesitation. 2 minutes later, she lost her balance. The fall was silent, except for the impact. Campus police arrived within minutes, but Jessica had already suffered a fatal skull fracture and major internal bleeding. She was pronounced dead at 2:14 a.m. The autopsy found no drugs or alcohol in her system. Sleep specialists classified the event as a first-episode parasomnia, likely triggered by acute stress. Jessica never woke up, never sensed the danger. Forensic review of the phone footage confirmed the absence of defensive movement, a key indicator of unconsciousness during the episode. The university responded with sweeping changes. Window locks were installed in all upper-floor dorms. Mandatory mental health and sleep disorder screenings became part of undergraduate orientation. Jessica's story shook the campus community, a reminder that the first sign of sleepwalking can sometimes be the last. Her parents later spoke at national conferences, urging colleges to treat stress and sleep health as matters of safety, not just student wellness. Daniel Reed spent his last years in Phoenix, Arizona, haunted by memories that refused to fade with daylight. At age 36, he was a decorated Army veteran, discharged after 2 tours in Afghanistan. His medical records at the VA detailed a long battle with post-traumatic stress disorder and night terrors. Reed's therapist received emails describing nights filled with panic. "Night is the worst," he wrote weeks before his death. Progress notes debated the risk his sleep disorder posed, and a staff psychiatrist's memo, later uncovered, recommended restricting his access to firearms. The suggestion was noted, but not enforced. On the evening of September 17, 2018, Reed paused his Netflix show at 11:14 p.m. Nothing in his routine hinted at what would follow. At 3:27 a.m., home surveillance recorded him moving through the living room in boxers and a t-shirt, his gait unsteady, eyes open but vacant. He opened his gun safe, entered the combination correctly, and retrieved a loaded pistol and a spare magazine. Forensic sleep medicine would later describe this as a classic example of automatism. Complex, purposeful actions carried out without conscious awareness, driven by a brain locked in a state between sleep and waking. Reed's history of violent parasomnia, where night terrors blend with confusional arousal, meant his body could respond to imagined threats with real-world actions, all while his conscious mind remained completely offline. At 3:29 a.m., neighbors heard a series of gunshots. One called 911, reporting loud banging, maybe fireworks. Police arrived at 3:36 a.m. and forced entry after receiving no response. Reed was found on the floor, a single gunshot wound to the chest, the weapon nearby. Paramedics attempted resuscitation, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. The autopsy confirmed the wound was self-inflicted, with no evidence of struggle, hesitation, or defensive injury. Toxicology showed no alcohol or sedatives. The gun safe and magazine were both open, but nothing was missing or hidden. Forensic experts concluded Reed had experienced a sleep terror episode, likely triggered by a nightmare of home invasion or combat, and acted out his defensive training without ever waking up. The aftermath extended far beyond his family. Internal V.A. emails, released under pressure from a whistleblower, revealed years of debate about whether patients with PTSD and sleep disorders should be required to store firearms in locked safes or surrender access during periods of acute symptoms. Reed's case, documented in forensic detail, pushed the VA to enact new protocols. Mandatory weapon storage for all PTSD patients with a history of parasomnia, regular risk screenings, and staff training to recognize sleep disorder warning signs. Sleep medicine specialists now cite the Reed case as a turning point, proof that violent automatism is not just a theoretical risk, but a real and deadly consequence when environmental hazards intersect with the sleeping brain's confusion. For families and clinicians, it forced a reckoning with the hidden dangers of untreated sleep disorders, especially when weapons are within reach. Evelyn Cooper's home in Seattle had always been a place of order and comfort. At 67, she kept routines shaped by decades as a nurse and a mother. After her husband's death, those routines began to fray. Her children started noticing oddities. Cereal bowls left out in the morning, the television blaring at midnight. During visits, her daughter would send late-night texts. "Mom was up again last night, just wandering." No one imagined these harmless-seeming lapses could turn fatal. On a mild night in May 2019, Evelyn turned off the television at 10:44 p.m. The house was silent. Sometime after 2 a.m., a motion sensor in the garage flickered to life. At 2:08 a.m., the ignition in her sedan clicked on. The garage door stayed closed. No one heard the engine running behind the thick walls. Carbon monoxide is invisible and odorless. It binds to hemoglobin in the blood, suffocating the body from the inside out. Even if Evelyn had woken, she would not have smelled or seen the gas filling the garage. Forensic toxicology later measured lethal levels of carboxyhemoglobin, evidence of exposure for nearly an hour. The car sat in neutral, keys in the ignition, the dashboard lights glowing in the darkness. There was no suicide note, no sign of planning or distress. By 7:05 a.m., her daughter arrived for a planned breakfast. She found Evelyn unresponsive in the driver's seat, slumped forward. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but it was too late. The medical examiner estimated death occurred around 3 a.m. The official cause, carbon monoxide poisoning. The manner, accidental, with sleep-related behavior as the underlying factor. Evelyn's medical file described a recent pattern of sleep-related eating, a form of parasomnia where the brain triggers complex actions during deep sleep. Over time, her episodes had grown more elaborate, evolving from kitchen visits to wandering into the garage. Specialists explained that during these episodes, higher reasoning shuts down, while the body moves on autopilot. There was no awareness, no fear, no chance to react. Investigators ruled out foul play and intentional self-harm. The scene matched classic parasomnia. Blank expression, no defensive injuries, logical but unconscious actions. In the weeks after her death, Evelyn's family spoke publicly about the hidden dangers of sleep disorders in older adults. Their advocacy prompted a surge in sales of carbon monoxide detectors across Seattle. By year's end, the City Council passed an ordinance requiring CO alarms in all new and existing homes. Local clinics began advising families to remove car keys from accessible places at night, especially for elderly relatives with sleepwalking histories. Evelyn Cooper never knew she was in danger. Her story became a warning that the most ordinary household risks can turn deadly when the sleeping brain takes control. For her children, and for the city, the lesson was clear. Safety measures are not just for the forgetful, but for anyone whose mind might wander while the body is still at rest. Marcus Johnston was 28 years old, a paramedic in Denver, and someone who understood medical emergencies better than most. Friends described him as steady under pressure, the first to volunteer for difficult shifts, and meticulous about safety at home. His fiancée, a nurse, kept a diary of his sleepwalking episodes, brief, sometimes harmless, but increasingly worrisome. Texts from the weeks before his death mention waking to find Marcus in the kitchen, searching for snacks or filling a glass of water, sometimes confused and unreachable. There were plans for a sleep study, but the appointment never came. On the night of January 14, 2021, the apartment was quiet. Marcus went to bed just after midnight. At 4:07 a.m., bottles of household cleaner, bleach, and ammonia-based disinfectants were removed from their usual spot under the sink. The next sound was a crash. His fiancée found him on the kitchen floor at 4:15, seizing and foaming at the mouth. Paramedics arrived within minutes. The chemical smell was overpowering. Empty bottles lay beside Marcus, their contents partially spilled, but it was clear from the scene and his medical history that he had not intended harm. Emergency responders intubated Marcus at the apartment. En route to the hospital, his heart stopped twice. At the ER, doctors documented severe burns to his mouth, throat, and esophagus, classic signs of caustic ingestion. Blood tests showed rapid onset of metabolic acidosis, kidney failure, and shock. Despite aggressive resuscitation, Marcus died just after sunrise. The official cause of death: multi-organ failure due to caustic chemical burns. The autopsy confirmed the absence of defensive injury or hesitation marks, no evidence of deliberate overdose, and no drugs or alcohol in his system. Forensic sleep experts reviewed the case. Marcus's fiancée provided text messages, sleep logs, and video clips showing previous episodes of confusional arousal, a parasomnia where the brain partially wakes, but decision-making and risk awareness remain offline. In this state, the body can perform complex automatic actions: walking, eating, even mistaking one substance for another. Investigators reconstructed the sequence. Marcus, still asleep, entered the kitchen, opened the cleaning cabinet, and drank from the nearest bottle, believing it to be water. The lack of struggle, the absence of pain reaction, and the speed of the fatal cascade all pointed to total unconsciousness throughout. The aftermath sent shockwaves through Denver's medical community. Hospital staff who knew Marcus struggled to process the irony. A paramedic trained to save others, undone by a hazard in his own home. The city's sleep medicine network responded within weeks. Advisories went out to all local clinics and emergency departments, urging immediate intervention for patients with parasomnia, no matter how mild the symptoms might seem. Recommendations included locking up hazardous chemicals, installing nighttime cabinet alarms, and fast-tracking sleep disorder evaluations for anyone with a history of complex nighttime behavior. Marcus Johnston's death became a reference point in medical safety briefings. His case is now cited in lectures and training modules as the ultimate warning. Even those who know the risks can fall victim when the sleeping brain takes control. For families of sleepwalkers, the lesson is stark. Environmental safety is not optional. For the medical field, his story forced a reckoning with the limits of knowledge and the urgent need for preventive action. From Tobias Chen's sixth-floor plunge to Marcus Johnston's fatal ingestion of household chemicals, these 7 cases expose how sleepwalking can turn the safety of home into a lethal trap. What unites every entry is absolute unconsciousness. Victims acted with open eyes but no awareness, their brains betraying basic survival instincts. The list reveals a chilling pattern. Age, health, or background offers no shield, and triggers range from medication, stress, and trauma to sheer chance. The most shocking entries, sleep driving at highway speeds, sleepwalking into carbon monoxide, or a trained paramedic fatally confusing cleaners for water, show that even expertise cannot prevent the dangers of parasomnia. Ranking criteria focused on documented evidence, medical confirmation, and the sheer unpredictability of the deaths. Ultimately, these stories highlight the medical reality that millions sleepwalk, but rare, fatal cases remind us of the urgent need for safety measures, early intervention, and greater awareness. Sleep is supposed to heal us, but in these cases, it wrote the final tragic chapter.